Good morning. I'm sorry I could not be with you in person today due to a family emergency, but I'm thankful to Prateek for giving me the opportunity to still connect with you and make this presentation. So, I'm from the Niti Aayog, which is the National Institution for Transforming India and is India's premier think tank of the government. Moving on to slide two, I just wanted to give you today a quick overview of India, highlight some of the key facts and major reforms that have been taking place in the country over the last few years, talk about progress in some of the selected areas like health, nutrition, the progress we've made in ending poverty, and finally, just some of the challenges and opportunities in the health space as I see it from a policy perspective. So, moving on to slide three, I'll start with the India overview. Slide four, please. India is one of the fastest growing large economies, as many of you would be aware. It is also one of the most open economies with significant amounts of foreign direct investment flowing into the country, including a record breaking $61 billion in 2016-17. We also have Aadhaar, which some of you might have heard about, is a unique biometric identity system, and it's been developed and scaled up in India, making it one of the world's largest, in fact, the world's largest biometric identity system. The country is also witnessing an unprecedented shift to urban areas, which also makes it a very interesting context at this point. In fact, according to a McKinsey study, an estimated 590 million people will live in cities by 2030. India also has a very young demographic compared to a number of other countries in the world where the population is generally aging, and a growing middle class with increasing purchasing power. The country is also a large supplier of English speaking workforce. There are robust and credible financial institutions in the country. We have an independent central bank. We have a credible regulator in the Securities Exchange Board of India. And finally, I would also highlight here that, as all of you would know, we are a very large country, but we also have tremendous diversity within the country. So just as an example, we have one state which is a subnational territory, which has a population of around 600,000 people, but we also have a state which has a population of over 200 million people. Now, as you can imagine, that diversity is one of our strengths, but it is also one of our big challenge areas when it comes to implementing various initiatives. So, moving on to slide five, there are a number of reforms that have been taking place in the country, but I just wanted to quickly go through some of them. Firstly, there is a huge push for digitization, setting up bank accounts and coupling that with Aadhaar, which is the unique biometric identity system I spoke about, and of course, along with the large penetration of mobile phones, it makes it much easier to do digital transactions. And we're really seeing a huge increase in digital transactions in the country. As far as ease of doing business is concerned, there are a number of initiatives that are being taken. The goods and services tax, which essentially integrates the different taxes into a single taxation system. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act, which makes it far easier to wind down companies. A number of labor law reforms are underway, as well as streamlining of environmental clearances. And all of this, as you can imagine, would really help with the ease of doing business in the country ultimately. We do have a very liberal FDI policy. In fact, we have 100% FDI permitted in all but a handful of sectors. It is permitted in pharmaceuticals and civil aviation as well. Startups are very much at the epicenter of policy in India. In fact, in 2016, 19 action points were released specifically pertaining to startups. And competitive and cooperative federalism is again a concept that is getting major push in the country, which is really pertains to the diversity I was talking about earlier and the different state governments that we have. The idea is not only to encourage states to learn good practices from each other, but also to get them to compete. So, for instance, we recently launched a health index, and the idea is to rank all states on their performance on health outcomes and encourage states that are lagging behind to really catch up, because we know that until this happens, the country as a whole will not really be able to make the kind of progress that we set ourselves to make. So, moving on to the next section, which is talking about progress in a few selected areas. I would move on to slide number 7, which is really talking about ending poverty, which is one of the big goals for India. And just to note here that we've made a sharp decline in poverty across all economic, social, and religious groups. Our social welfare schemes have become much more efficient. We are leveraging Aadhaar, mobile telephony, and the push to get as many people as possible into the formal banking system that is being leveraged by the government to directly transfer benefits of social welfare schemes to beneficiaries. And that, as you can imagine, is helping to plug a lot of leakages in the system and eliminate duplicate beneficiaries, etc. There's a huge push on infrastructure, on sanitation, on drinking water, and electrification. And in fact, over 99% of our villages are now electrified. We obviously have a lot of challenges in terms of ensuring that every household has access to electricity, every household gets a reliable supply. But just the fact that we've been able to achieve this so far is no mean achievement either, given the size of the country and the problems. Moving on to the next slide, um, where we're really going to talk about ending hunger and improving nutrition, another major goal for the country. Again, all of you would have heard about the large numbers of stunting and underweight in the country, but I think just to note that we've made substantial reduction in all these areas. There's a long way to go, undoubtedly, but there has been considerable progress that has been made. In terms of, we're also the largest producer of milk, pulses, and spices globally. And there's a huge emphasis on increasing the productivity of farmers. So we, in fact, have an explicit goal of doubling farmers' income by the year 2022. And finally, in this section, I would move on to health and well-being. Again, we've seen significant improvements in a number of indicators, whether it's maternal mortality, it's the rate of institutional deliveries, so ensuring safe births, and under 5 mortality rates, etc. We've also eliminated polio and made very good progress with HIV/AIDS, which we need to keep up. And so there has been a lot of progress that has been made. Of course, we are left with a number of challenges as well. We have a dual burden of disease. We have huge variations in health outcomes within and between states. So I'll finally, on that note, move on to the last section, which is really on challenges and opportunities in the health space, again from a policy perspective. So on slide 11, I just wanted to quickly go through some of the key highlights of our national health policy, which was in fact released just this year, and just to talk about a couple of the major policy shifts that have happened. So I think the most noteworthy is that we as a country are moving from sickness care to wellness. So I think there is a realization that given our sheer scale of problems, diversity of problems, complexity of problems, we cannot be focused just on the healthcare side and the curative side. We very much need to move towards prevention, wellness, and that is a huge shift that we're beginning to see even in the policy space. So the policy, for instance, talks about things like health and wellness centers. It talks about really focusing very systematically on the social determinants of health, like nutrition, water, sanitation, and even creating a public health management cadre, so, to ensure that health care and does not drown the public health aspect and the prevention aspect, which is really key for us. And the other interesting aspect is, I think, the talk of strategic purchasing of healthcare services, especially at the secondary and tertiary levels of care, from public and private providers. So this is really bringing in the notion of competition. It is bringing in the notion of being able to leverage the private sector capacity to deliver our health goals in the country. So again, I think it's a really important shift that the policy is trying to demonstrate. And I think on health systems, on data systems, there is a huge emphasis. So, on electronic health records, on really building a very comprehensive data system so that our policy making can become much more systematic and much more tailored to the needs of people in different parts of the country. I'll move on to my final slide. I've talked about the challenges already, so I won't go through them again. But just to quickly talk about the opportunities, I think there's definitely an opportunity, and there's a huge push for this right now, for the government to spend more on public and preventive health, especially, which is where really we see the maximum market failures, and which is where we really feel the government has a huge role to play. Technology in terms of ensuring that we have access to the right kind of data, technology in terms of ensuring that people in rural and remote areas have access to health services, for instance, through teleconsultations, ensuring that our frontline health workers can use technology to screen people for early symptoms of disease, to create awareness about different types of diseases. So, really tremendous opportunities in the technology space at this point in time. Private sector capacity, I alluded to earlier as well. The government is very, very keen to leverage private sector capacity. So, for instance, in the area of access to medicines, we're developing some innovative models around e-pharmacy, etc., where we're really trying to combine the government objectives with the capabilities in the private sector to ensure that even the person in the remotest village has access to medicines. And research, really not just clinical research but also operational research of what are the service delivery models that we can use to really reach out to the last mile. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much again for this opportunity, and I've left my email address on the first slide. So in case any of you would like to reach out or continue any of these discussions, that would be great. Once again, I wish I could have been there in person, but hopefully I will get that opportunity soon. Thank you very much.